So first of all, let me welcome you all to this session. It is our 6th chapter in our joint IAU and UOC series on innovative education for unshaped futures. It is our 6th chapter, but is also our final chapter of the series. But it's also a very important one because we're now zooming in on data governance and what should we be aware of. So the fact of posing this question is also to underline that we are not necessarily all experts in data governance, but we are all navigating in an increasingly digital world. And even so, now that we have more teaching and learning taking place online or remotely. So I think that over the past year and a half, during the time of the pandemic, I think that most institutions around the world, despite their differences and despite their different contexts, can agree that this pandemic has actually led to a reinforced digital infrastructures within in the institutions, which also means an increase of digital data. So this is really some of the questions that we are going to put forward here for discussion today. And I am not an expert in data governance, but I am very pleased to be here with the two extraordinary speakers who will address this topic from two different perspectives. First, we will hear from Nella Petkovic, who is the Chief Information Officer at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada, who will provide a perspective as a Chief Information Officer. And then after that, we will turn to Juliana Raffaghelli, who is the professor at the Faculty of Education and Psychology at UOC. She will share some of her findings from her research, particularly looking at data literacy of faculty. So two very different perspectives, but will allow us to have a very good conversation about the trends that we are seeing, opportunities and challenges. So I will not take more of your time, but rather turn to presenting our first speaker in a bit more detail. So let me just stop sharing this one. So the first speaker is Nella Petkovic, who joined Laurier in 1995 as a senior system analyst and who's been working for the university over many years. And in 2014, she was appointed the Chief Information Officer. And in that capacity, she has helped shape ICT at the university, created and implemented a strategic plan, and as well as the establishment of a formal ICT governance structure and the realization and adoption of a university-wide cloud policy. Nella holds a Master of Science in Electronic Engineering and is a designated project management professional. She also sits on the Canadian University Council of Chief Information Officers. She co-chairs the Ontario Cybersecurity Higher Education Consortium Steering Committee, and she has recently joined the Cybersecurity Technical Committee at Canada's National Research and Education Network. I hope I got it right, Nella, otherwise you will correct me, but we are very pleased to have you here with us today, and we look forward to learning from your experience, from your institutional point of view. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Trine, and I will try to share my screen now. You can see the screen? Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. It's very early morning in Canada. That's why I'm always tied up with that. As Trine mentioned, my name is Nella Petkovic. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. We are located about 90 kilometers west of Toronto in a city called Waterloo in the province of Ontario. Thank you for giving me again the opportunity to be with you and present today. I will start with the influence the pandemic had on us and the ripple effects that we are still dealing with. I will talk about the importance of cybersecurity on data, our experience with data governance, and our journey that has started on the development of a digital strategy. And all that from the IT point of view to complement the academic and research stance that Juliana will share. So the immediacy of the pandemic effect was seen on our newly remote workforce. Overnight, we pivoted from being a university that offered more than 90% of its courses in person to deliver them fully online. It was really a dramatic change compared to what we were used to prior to that March 17th of 2020. As a remote workforce, we had to think about many security vulnerabilities, including scattered endpoint devices that are off campus, the delivery of software updates, and personal devices accessing Laurier data. With more of our workforce migrating to cloud services at an accelerating pace, we still needed to be mindful of what information gets placed where, who has access to it, and what that data is securely backed up. While these concerns are always present, regardless of our data location, solutions that we have used in the past may have not necessarily lent themselves to future cloud deployments. As the pandemic continues, and likely after it tapers off, we expect to see the same needs arise. We now have a flexible work policy that allows staff and faculty to deliver services and classes from home, which also benefits students. So the concept of the remote workforce has and will likely stay with us in some capacity. Further, in response to the new work environment, we introduced a number of new software solutions to ensure the continuity of teaching, learning, research, and administrative services. Here you can see a small subset of the solutions we have introduced in a short period of time. I will dive into two. To ensure the business continuity and respond to our users' requests, we enabled Zoom in addition to Teams, as we are a Microsoft 365 shop, to facilitate virtual meetings, courses, deliver course materials, etc. A platform that has become very popular, as we can see from today's webinar. We have also implemented Career Echo software to support virtual career fair, as we were and still are unable to hold them in person. It is important to mention that we have not retired any of these solutions. In fact, the list is still growing, with new requests coming in daily. And with every new solution, there is a new pool of data added to the already full mix. What we also witnessed in the last 18 months was the exponential rise of ransomware attacks. Once merely a nuisance to fewer organizations, has proven to be so profitable for cybercriminal organizations that it is now considered a primary threat to nearly every business long-term survival. A recent ransomware attack by the REvil syndicate took out thousands of businesses worldwide in a single day, including the railway, pharmacy chain, and hundreds of storefronts of a European grocery store. It is a problem that falls across all industries. Higher education is not exempt. And all signs indicate that it will continue to grow. There are, of course, other types of cybercrimes that threaten higher education, but even if we have a full day to talk about cybersecurity, we will not be able to cover it all. But the point is, cybercriminals are after data, and the universities are a goldmine for them. I also wanted to share this slide that showcases the importance of data as it relates to cybersecurity. Not only does it demonstrate how just costly data breaches are for the education sector, it also highlights where we rank amongst some of the most notoriously data-rich sectors that are most often targeted by cybercriminals. Although this slide is from 2018, we know that the frequency of cybercrimes is only increasing, threatening to simultaneously increase the costs to our institutions. Needless to say, managing cybersecurity is of utmost importance to the data, and it is one of the highest risks at higher education institutions. So everything that I shared points to the importance of data for every single institution. With data, there is also an added responsibility to have data governance in place, pandemic or not. So what does that mean? Data governance is essential for any organization that uses data to make decisions. It is an enabling framework of decision rights to ensure data quality and integrity, data protection, you have to know what and where your crown jewels are in order to protect them, and also to have rules and regulations that can be enforced. At Laurier, we have a data governance working group that consists of AVP levels, deans, etc., as data stewards. IT acts as the data custodians, with institutional research representatives leading the group. In addition, data governance is critical to ensuring that your business intelligence or analytics initiatives are successful. We have a partnership with the Institutional Research Group to jointly provide business intelligence for our institution. I listed a few policies we put in place to protect the data at Laurier. They're all publicly available, with the first one being Information Security Statement. You will see the inclusion of definitions, such as what is information, the classes of information, what are stewards, custodians, etc. The records management policy also references those definitions. It further provides directions to units about their role in records management, establishes a common terminology, and provides guidance about the management of university records throughout their life cycle. As we are a public institution, we also have a privacy protection and information access policy that provides guidance to those seeking information held by the university or who have concerns regarding how their personal information and personal health information are collected, used, and disclosed. Lastly, Cloud Services Policy was presented to provide guidance and assistance to all members of the community who use or wish to use externally hosted information technology products in the conduct of study, research, teaching, and administration. The guidelines are intended to establish a process whereby members of the Laurier community can use cloud computing services and other external information technology without jeopardizing Laurier information and computing resources. I also wanted to share that we do not have all data processes perfected. They're constantly evolving in response to new regulations and issues that we are dealing with. So wherever you are in your journey, that is okay, as long as you have started it. Beyond the necessary policy implications, I also recommend considering the importance of data connectivity with new systems and digital footprints we are bringing daily. Institutional reputation, funding grants, research partnerships, student recruitment and retention, revenue growth are just a few benefits of that connectivity. You can see the rest on the slide. So when you introduce new systems, you have to think about the utilization and the protection of that data immediately, not as an afterthought. So over the last year, the digital transformation within the sector has accelerated tremendously. As we look forward, in order to stay relevant, we need a digital strategy to help us determine how we can make the most of this momentum to build new pathways between our services and technology. A digital strategy provides clear and realistic expectations of technology, services, and operational practices. It ensures that the solutions we implement are approached purposefully and meet the needs of the communities that we serve. This will enable individual and institutional success, help better understand the potential of digital technologies and associated services, prioritize our investments, and readily apply them to better serve our diverse community. Regarding the data, the digital strategy will facilitate a data-informed culture. So we need to collect and use data dynamically and securely to inform our strategy and priorities. We need to harness information to drive user experience and service design, and analyze and use key performance indicators to access the effectiveness of activities, services, and programs. Our digital journey has already started through the implementation of various initiatives that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. In late October, we'll be hosting a series of focus groups for students, faculty, and staff to provide an opportunity to contribute and help to shape our digital strategy. But to learn more, if you're interested about the development, you can visit the website that is referenced on the slide. So this really concludes my presentation from the IT perspective, but after Juliana's presentation, I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Nella, for your presentation and for introducing this topic from this institutional perspective, allowing us as well to see it from a helicopter view, how all the things come together, and at the same time explaining what has your strategy been. And I also found it very interesting how you include, of course, different stakeholders within the institution in order to design the way forward, because I think this is what we are also seeing as one of the things coming out of the pandemic. It has led to increased transversal collaboration within the institutions in order to find solutions, support systems, in order to let faculty, staff, students arrive at their goals or their intended results, if you want. So thank you very much for sharing this presentation, and I'm sure that maybe some of you in the audience has questions for Nella. Then please go ahead and put them in the chat. We are going to continue our presentations right now, but we will come back for a question and answers session at the end. So do please put your questions in the chat in case you have any. So now let me turn to introducing Juliana. So Juliana is a professor at the Faculty of Education and Psychology at UOC. She's the principal investigator of the project Professional Learning Ecologies for Digital Scholarship, Modernizing Higher Education by Supporting Professionalism. It is a project funded by the Ministry of Science and Technology and the University of Spain within the framework of the Ramón y Cajal, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, program. Juliana is a Doctor of Education from the Ca' Foscari University of Venice, and her research interests relate to the integration of educational technologies in higher education and professional learning. She's been part of several EU projects with a focus on development of e-learning infrastructures, supporting educators' professional development. And recently, she has focused on critical data literacy as a key component of emerging technological phenomena in higher education and society. And we look forward to learning about your research findings. Juliana, we are pleased that you have accepted to join and share them with us here. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Trine, and also Nella, for a very interesting presentation, which I find very much connected with mine. I have a social sciences background, psychology and education, so my perspective could be seen as a little bit different from Nella's, who comes from the sector of IT. But it is actually very much connected, and I've tried to go through the presentation and explain more. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So I use this concept of fair data cultures in higher education because what Nella described as a set of technological instruments and configurations and technological infrastructure is actually also very much connected to stakeholders, practices, narratives, interests, and meaning-making processes. And this is a culture that very much is very much connected with an organizational culture that evolves, that can be transformed by the people's activity, but it is also sometimes hidden. It's not very clear as infrastructure for all the actors, the participating stakeholders, and it is relevant. Nella, I'm going to tap onto your set of practices and type of technologies and problem solving you show to just focus how this technological background is part of the daily life and the need of developing skills and knowledge around this infrastructure. So this is because I also talk about engaging with complexity, because data, as you will see, has been introduced to us in through a number of perspectives. Some of them like an utopia, and some of them like in a very dystopic way. So the idea is to try to search for a balance, strike a balance, and understand that it is a complex and evolving universe. So to make a start, I share these two images relating facial recognition at the technology, as technology at gate at the airports. And it was developed at the beginning as a form of security, as an instrument for security in the airports. And then it was found out that several biases in the algorithmic, analysis of faces could provoke situations that were very complex, or at least could have a psychological and social impact on the customers. So one of the main problems was how this data is being captured and how it's lately being processed or used, and the way this process is materialized through labeling, through algorithmic manipulation, and through systems of recommendation or recognition is a matter of concern, and is a matter that has to be controlled by a number of stakeholders. This is because I say cover this data, because the destinations of data are not always very clear. And this same pattern of enthusiastic engagement with data and the disillusionment because of the errors and the problems and the biases of data was also reflected on the literature. The social sciences tapped on the technological development to analyze the impact, social impacts, and there was a way of chance. The way this like and in everybody lies the fact that Google could research. And then in very relevant contributions to literature like Kathy O'Neill, Weapons of Mass Destruction, Algorithms of Operation by Noble, Sophia Noble, Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, for Automating Inequalities by Virginia Eubanks. We came to know that there were very, very relevant impacts on people's life when using algorithms and using data-driven technologies. And as Nella explained, the pandemic and the use of platforms very intensified this phenomenon. The way data was captured, used, sometimes it was even used for good, in an expectation to provide better services and instruments for the teachers and the learners to solve the problems during the pandemics. But then the downsides came out. In the European, this is a clear example of how this balance between the goods and the not so good of the data-driven technologies evolved. And for example, in the EU context, while there is a 10% 10% of artificial intelligence being produced by SMEs, by small enterprises, and 25% funded by public organizations. Multinationals mainly come from the US area and with Asia, funding very competitively, in a very competitive way, AI developments. And we know that AI is very much based on technological and data infrastructures. Therefore, the EU response was based on the regulations, to regulate a market that was very much globalized and where data could be processed in Asia or in the US, but actually came, for example, from EU citizens or Latin American citizens or citizens from Australia and other geopolitical areas in the world. So GDPR was a very an effort to provide regulations to strike a balance, to search for a balance, and keep on moving towards a balanced development, fair data cultures. In this context, higher education and also community organizations and the school system attempted to develop the concept of data literacy, the fact that any citizen, but particularly educators and the operators, all the stakeholders in higher education institutions and other educational institutions, needed to be aware of the evolution of the situation, needed to be aware of the way data, the data-driven practices and processes were evolving. And then we had a number of debates around data literacy, basing on the information cycle or civic technology and engagement with data in popular education, personal data literacies, the discussion, the debate about data from a feminist perspective by Ignacio and Klein, and a very clear understanding that in an era of social media and platforms capturing data in several ways, it was very much relevant to deepen on new forms of data literacy. But in any case, there were some contradictions and tensions in these discourses themselves. So it was not really clear. There was not a really clear way. What was clear from the beginning is that data as a phenomenon, data practices and narratives required an interdisciplinary, local, complex dialogue to define the needed literacies and then to improve the practices, to improve even the technologies practices, not only educators, but also all the stakeholders in higher education and educational institutions. Here is where my story evolved in my research project, where I engaged with this concept of fair data cultures and supporting professionalism, faculty development, and the ways this faculty development needed to be implemented within higher education. Avoiding a banal approach to being too much enthusiastic or embracing a positivistic approach to data. Data will provide all of the solutions we need to improve our teaching and learning practices, but also to avoid too critical approaches where the complexity and the possibilities of co-creation and creative outcomes of using data could be embraced. So this is where I try to network. You see a number of projects I am engaged and working on in order to look at the problem of data and faculty development around data in higher education through several perspectives as a complex object. And here is the process I followed from a systematic review, where I discovered that there was too much focus on technical data literacies and the development of data scientists, instead of also developing critical data literacies and the problem of bias, ethics, and so on, data ethics particularly, towards exploring a number of projects that were making a huge effort to understand data from a critical perspective. For example, the Global South, open data to empower the society, and so on. I also work on a number of webinars engaging with several experts coming from China, the US, Latin America, Europe, in order to understand the several perspectives around data. And then I work in 12 workshops with almost 300 educators in order to reflect what can we do as educational researchers and educators to live well with data, to go through open data for an open educational science, to improve the educational practice towards also a critical perspective when working and in teaching and learning through platforms in higher education. And lastly, I have been working in 3 cases comparing data cultures, the differences in data cultures as they evolve through participatory approaches from the several stakeholders, in order to discuss around the data infrastructures and the way they shape educational practices. So to better understand this complexity, I also explored conceptually from 2 pairs of tensions, from dispositions, mindsets to data that are more proactive, more enthusiastic, to more reactive or cautious approaches to data, more critical, and also to try to understand the differences between data that is already open and data that is private, that needs to be kept in a private sphere and protected. And then I organized all the perspective I had been exploring as data for public good, for example, the cases of open data and the open science, in data science and data visualizations, all the developments in platforms as a source of creativity and innovation. But that's needed to be balanced by data ethics and discussions about data justice, and also with a sustained data activism to control and to improve the access to data for good. Then I reflected that data is not only to be used or produced, but also has to be controlled, and there has to be structures of participation. And that data literacy in higher education needs to cover 4 areas or 4 approaches, from technical data literacy to data literacy for the open access to open knowledge, to critical and personal data literacy around data privacy. In the case of AU, I started to spot several projects working in the same, through several perspectives in one of these 4 quadrants. And the situation is evolving very rapidly towards implementing programs, implementing courses from undergraduates to faculty development in higher education. There is an ongoing debate. And in the case of Europe and several projects, EU collaboration with several EU countries in transnational partnerships got funded and are evolving right now. To conclude, to get to a conclusion, We have several instruments, not only in the EU context. In the last week, I took part in Latin American debate around data privacy and the need of developing tools for the educators to protect data privacy and the an accurate use of and an aware use of the e-learning platforms. But we have instruments already, regulations like the GDPR, the Digital Education Action Plan, and also the upcoming deliverables on the high-level group on artificial intelligence that will help us to become smart as educators, to work in a context of data-fied systems, and to reflect about data ecosystems, also understanding the contribution of the open source movement and the way the data has to be, shared and distribute the power connected to the platforms and big tech industry. So in the case, through this approach, we are going to achieve social impact from higher education to the society. For example, I am engaging in the development of a framework, the digital competence updates, to address the development of skills in higher education, but also in other educational levels, relating living well data in the society. And we need also accountability and trustworthiness in developing data infrastructure through participatory systems that protect privacy from the design. But these also require abilities and a concern and the contribution of higher education from faculty. So this is, an evolving situation, and hopefully our debate here will, lead us to data futures, positive data futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliana, for your presentation, and very interesting as well to follow and see how there's this need to break down data into different types of data in order to, of course, manage it and treat it according to the need, because I think that we all agree, and I think that's what I hear from both of you in your presentations, that we do see an exponential generation of data, which was already existing prior to the pandemic, but is only further accelerated and reinforced because the pandemic has forced us to rely on more systems in order to work from distance. This is also what you showed very clearly, Nella, in your presentation. So now, please, from the audience, as Andrea was saying in the chat, please put your questions in there. I will start, and then I'll come back for your questions. I first wanted to ask you, Nella, now listening to Juliana and breaking down data at these different levels, I became curious to know, in terms of professional development of staff and this data literacy notion, is it something that you're working with at the university as well? Because we cannot take for granted that everyone are a data specialist or scientist, but we need to be able to function, all of us, in this digital infrastructure. So I was curious to hear a little bit about how you address this question.
That's a really good question. And again, thank you for a phenomenal presentation, Juliana. We need to talk some more. It's really great. So you're absolutely right. This is not something that you would know as an offsite. You need to be educated on it, and you need to know what you're dealing with. So when I was talking about the engagement at the institutional level, it's a team sport. Everybody needs to be involved. So when we talk about data stewards, those are the people that need to understand that they're responsible for their data. And then when you go deeper into it, to the levels that Juliana was talking about, we talk about open data, we talk about internal data and restricted data. So you have to understand different levels of data. in order how to protect them and also how to deal with them, who has access to the data, etc. What are your attention policies? Because if you don't have the data, you're good, right? There are no breaches, there are no privacy implications, etc. So educating data stewards and having data stewards now educating others within their areas is of utmost importance. So that needs to happen on the institutional level, absolutely.
Thank you thank you, Nella, for your answer. I think that's very interesting. Juliana, I was also interested in hearing from you. I mean, you're working at a fully online university, so I suppose that it is more or less a requirement for staff to be data literate, right? But I was thinking in terms of your research, what are some of the recommendations that you would put forward to institutions around the world? What are some of the advice that you would give if you could in terms of how to build this fair data era?
Yes. Well, I think some of the takeaways is that it is an ongoing phenomenon. It is complex. We don't have, I really don't feel, I think it's very important, the work that is being done by social scientists, by social technical research in highlighting the risks of data abuses and naive approaches to data, like for example, the biases in AI systems, like learning analytics, and some solutions that have been promoted as the panacea, something that would going to solve the problem, even removing the teachers and providing solutions, cheap solutions for crowded higher education institutions. This is not the true, and there is plenty of literature demonstrating that and being highly critical with this. We need to be aware of that. And I think we need to create spaces for faculty to be aware of that, to be critical. But from the other side, we cannot neglect the fact that AI has an incredible creative potential for our societies, that there might be, beyond the cautionary tales, there might be incredibly positive solutions and approaches that would go from protecting mental health to helping the people to be more creative and to connect with the most relevant things around teaching and learning. I have participated. There is a very interesting issue, special issue, edited, I think, by Buckingham Shum. He is researcher in the field, a computer scientist in the field of learning analytics, and he put together people that is come from the era of computer science and is doing hard development around learning analytics, and then put social scientists like Neil Selwyn and Prisnu that are very critical and hold positions around data ethics. And he tried to strike a balance, to arrive to a balance. And we need to search for a balance through interdisciplinary spaces in our institutions. Right now at UOC, we created a group, an interdisciplinary group, and we are discussing together educationalists, people from education, psychologists, educational technologists, and so on, with people from computer science, engineering, mathematicians. We are discussing our data infrastructures, the problems we have with our data infrastructure, because UOC as a fully online university, you could see it as a heaven for a data scientist, but it's not. We have our problems. We have the problems with the cloud. We have data breaches. We have problems with security. And these are infrastructure and I mean the digital footprint, we are also aware about the ecological footprint and using too much data. So we are aware of all that issues, whereas at the same time, we need to advance in a discussion about the social and human impact of using data. And this is done through spaces of co-creation, collaboration, co-designing technologies and technological solutions within higher education.
Thank you very much. That was a very good reply. And I think that this idea of the balance, because this is where we are finding ourselves between the opportunities and the good that we can do, or the technology as support structures in order to arrive at our goal, or whether it's education, whether it's research or whatever domain. But then at the flip side of things, as you were always also showing, Nella, that there is this question of security, and we have to be operating in a safe environment, and we have to make sure that those who provide data knows how the data is potentially used, or so it's about this constant striking a balance. Nella, can you maybe react as well to Juliana and her reflections about the need for interdisciplinary responses in order to shape the future forward? I think that it aligns very well with your approach of also having this transversal group of people working together. But I'll give you the floor as well to react.
Absolutely. You cannot have one person do it all, as you cannot have one department do it all. So this, as I always say, it is a team sport. Data understanding is a team sport. Security is a team sport. Security is everybody's issue. So we talk about breaches. We understand that the human factor is the biggest entry point there. So that's why security is a team sport. So when we talk about it from the data perspective, I do not see a difference, basically. So in order for us to talk more, to educate, we have to constantly do so. But with everything that's happening, and I'm sure it's in Juliana's university as well, you have budget constraints, you need to react to different things, you're putting down fires. So it is hard sometimes from the strategic point of view to sit down and really pound on it. So finding the time and pushing that effort is really hard at the university level that we see. Everybody has their own agendas, but priorities as well that they need to deliver on. So I would like to see the university that figured it all, not to my knowledge maybe, but I think it's an ongoing problem and a battle, but we still need to contribute to it. So I'm curious, Juliana.
If I can say something, tapping into what you were saying, Nella, and also there are no solutions to be borrowed. There are no universal solutions. Data infrastructure have to be planned locally, contextually. They depend even on cultural factors, on the way some people accept their data to be used for certain purposes, and the way, I mean, there are constraints around privacy or the way they understand data becomes a tool, an instrument, and a way of representing human information and knowledge. So we have to be aware that there are no universal solutions, particularly tools embedded in platforms that promise to solve problems are not the way. For sure, you need to develop complex teams with technologies, computer scientists that are open to ethical reflections, and from the other side, from educators that provide the pedagogical support to the development of instruments. And of course, at academic level, for the development and reflection relating to quality, educational quality, and the role of higher education in the society.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from you somehow is that I mean, as you were saying, Nella, time is something sometimes an issue because everything comes on top of everything else and all the other priorities that we have. So maybe one of the steps as well is to really recognize that developing, I mean, a continuous development of data literacy needs to be recognized really as part and parcel of the jobs of the different employees within the universities, that it's not just an extra add-on on top of everything else, but that it is really something that takes time and is needed in order to shape the future. And I think ultimately, that is also important for the students, because we want faculty to have conversations with students about data and digital footprints as well. So maybe that is one of the way forwards, where we have to integrate it more systematically as a part of jobs across institutions. Is that something that you see as well, Nella?
Absolutely, and for students also to understand, as I mentioned in one of the slides that I had, you need to know what is happening with your information. You need to know, going back to, I love it, I'm going to use it, Juliana, Quo Vadis. So where is my data? Where is my data going? Whatever I put in, I need to know that. So it's perfect. And then when we bring in complexities, one of the questions that I saw here in the chat was about the protection of data that's in the cloud. So what is happening with the vendors kind of side when the data leaves premises of the universities? And we know that that's going, it's exponentially growing. The way that you can try to mitigate as a risk from the risk perspective is, we call it a privacy and security impact assessment for a vendor. So before even going into a contract with a vendor, you need to understand how they store data, how they do backups of the data, what is their incident response in place. So if there's a breach happening, how they're going to call you, how they're going to really protect your data. So there are different questions, and I would recommend there's an EDUCAUSE actually HackVac system for the privacy and security impact assessment that's very useful and almost universal, that universities can adopt and maybe figure out their own questions within it, but it covers both security and privacy impacts and questions that everybody at the university would have. And that's specifically for the internal and restricted data. For the open data, it's a whole different ballgame, right? It's open to everybody, as Juliana said, and then you need to know how to utilize that open data. That's a completely different set of questions that Juliana addressed. But that internal and restricted data, it's of utmost importance from the vendor's perspective, because you're still responsible for your risk. It's not that you're pushing that to the vendor, but you have to work with the vendor to understand what that risk is, and bring it back to the university. So that's why what is important, again, from the IT side, what we are trying to work when we work with faculties and staff, yes, solutions are easy, and you can bring other solutions to the university, and you know, it's cheap, it's open source, but you have to understand the impact on the data, because you're pushing your data is going then to that vendor. But if it's cheap, if you're not doing your privacy and security and impact assessment, you don't know what is happening with that data.
That's a very important point as well, Nella, and thank you for picking up on the question from the chat. Juliana, there was also a few questions for you, so I'm just going to put them forward to you to give you a chance to respond as well. Someone was asking if you could elaborate a little bit more on the different data cultures that you were referring to. And then another one is saying that we agree that complexity is the challenge posed by datafication to societies and governments in general, and in universities in particular. But how should university deal with not only the visible aspects, but also the invisible, blurred side of the complexity, such as digital colonialism, hierarchical relations, cryptic algorithm design, digital economy agreements included in trade treaties, etc., etc. So if you want to address as you wish those questions, you have the floor.
Very complex and interesting question. Let me clarify a little bit, for example, through an example, two types of data cultures. UOC, fully online university, and other two universities, which names I'm not going to share for privacy, that are traditional universities I worked with in faculty development around the data infrastructure. We engage in workshops, analyzing the cloud, the type of tools that were being used. That's in between the pandemics. And one of the differences is that, for example, we at the fully online university, we can capture all the data that is being produced by the student, mostly because the students also go outside and they use sometimes risky tools, as Nella was saying, tools that they are not aware of the risks that encompass. So we are also working at the UOC on an activity preparing the students. We started working with the students to be aware of the terms of use, for example, understanding which digital ecosystems they were going through and the type of data risks that this ecosystem embedded. And this is part of starting to build, to explore a data culture in a fully online university. It is not the same, for example, for a traditional university where the students spend time in analogical spaces where the data cannot be captured. The data, there is no data simply. It is not a fact that whether the data is small or big data, it is about no data. In the way that, for example, if you produce a system or use a system of predictive analytics using modelizing student data, it won't be as accurate as it could be for a fully online university. Therefore, the type of, and also the fact that these, the platforms used in traditional universities might be inside the university or outside, given to providers as in a data ecosystem, in technological infrastructure that could be diversified in a number of providers whose data approaches might not well known. So retracing all the type of chains of data of digital providers for the universities is essential, as Nella was saying. The way the stakeholders, not only faculty but also staff, engages in understanding these type of tools is also part of a data culture. The way you discuss about the metrics, the assemblage of learning analytics with academic analytics, that is the way data is captured also to show the performance, the institutional performance. This is part of the data culture. We are working on the concept. It's a concept based on the concept of data culture itself. It's a concept that is not new. It has been developed in the context of organizational development, but it is new in the context, the debate around data uses and abuses. And this made me go through the second question relating colonialism, hierarchical relations, and algorithms. It is true there is a literature analyzing the unfair and unbalanced relationship between big tech multinationals, the way they entered as a Trojan horse in the educational system during the pandemic and before, offering services that were supposed to be easier or, I mean, for free, nice, and the way they then decided to capture data and to use this data to produce, to monetize it, to produce new services and systems of recommendation systems to be sold to the universities and the educational system itself. In this sense, there is the idea that there is a colonization through the type of body shaping, behavior shaping that these systems could generate over the data captured from these institutions. From the other side, if there is data, if the stakeholders, the educators, the students are data literate, they will engage in activisms to change, to transform, and to avoid, and to at least discuss about the necessary regulation. Because this was said by Linda Castañeda, a scholar from Spain, and Ben Williamson, a scholar from UK. We need new toolbox and to think about data literacy as a relational matter. The fact that the educator cannot be a solo player. You are not alone in selecting a platform, in taking decisions, or even protecting your students. You need regulation. You need a good technological infrastructure, as the one Nela illustrated. You need good technologies protecting the security of the system. So all of these, and you need an ethical reflection for sure, and a pedagogical reflection for sure. So all of these generates a relational situation that is the space for debate around the complexity, colonialism, unfair relationships, and so on.
Thank you very much, Juliana, for your very good replies to both of the questions put forward from the audience. Unfortunately, I see that time is ticking and that this session has already come to an end, which is a pity, because I think that it is a very interesting conversation and one that we need to continue beyond this specific series. I think that it is only the beginning. So let me start by thanking our speakers, Juliana and Nella, for your excellent presentation. It's really been a pleasure listening to you and learning from you, and thank you for taking part in this conversation. And we are also very pleased to have women presented in this conversation on data governance. I think that is important as well in terms of inclusiveness. So that was also a specific thing. I think that we've seen several important things coming out of this conversation about striking the balance between the opportunities, the good things that we can get out of technology and the data that we produce, but also the risks that we have to manage and find solutions in order to minimize negative consequences, the need for interdisciplinarity or transversal solutions, that we engage across disciplines, we engage across the institution in order to jointly shape the solutions. And as Juliana was saying, we really need a language that allows us to talk in terms of data in different levels, so that even if we're not data specialists, that we can take part in the conversation and that we know. So I think that we need to recognize that data literacy, or the continuous development of data literacy, needs to be recognized within the institutions, and should also be part, I think, of curriculum for students, so that we build already the competences of students to navigate in an increasingly digital world. So very many important messages already from this beginning of the conversation, and I hope that we will continue. I mean, Juliana, you also mentioned the fact that there is no one size solution fits all. I think that's true. I mean, it needs to be anchored in the local context, but what we try to do, at least at the IAU, is we bring people together across countries, across continent, because I think that sharing experiences is a very good start in order to hear different types of solutions. And Nella, thank you for presenting the one from your perspective, because this is a way that we can share knowledge in order to shape the digital future that we want. So I want to thank you all. Thank you to the audience for having participated. I'm not only closing this specific webinar, I'm also closing the IAU-UOC series overall, at least for now. So I also just want to say thank you to our colleagues from UOC who have contributed to the development of the series, most particularly Albert Sanra, but also his colleagues Nadia Gmelch and Andrea Tabanero, who is with us here in the chat as well. It's been a pleasure for IAU, as usual, to work with UOC and to pick up some important topics for conversation. And I promise you that we will continue these conversations beyond this series. So thank you all for being with us and looking forward to our future collaboration. Thank you and bye.
Bye.